The last couple of weeks, I want you to know that the problems that we're having has not been with our equipment. We've been having some real serious Wi-Fi problems the last couple of weeks. And, about the worst thing that can happen to a person in 2021 is the Wi-Fi goes out. And so my heart goes out to you. For those of you wondering why the Wi-Fi has been messing up, I know that's just a thing of tragedy. But we are going to trudge on anyway. I am so glad that you guys are so excited about the lesson on the book of Romans. Unfortunately, too bad for me, that's not the sermon that I'm preaching this morning. I believe that may be what Curtis is preaching tonight. And so for all of you, there we go, for all of you that got excited about that, I'm sorry, that's not me. I'm not clever enough to preach something that you would actually enjoy. Just kidding. You can go to John chapter 4. We'll be there in a second. As we're talking about water changes everything. In the book of John chapter 4, Jesus has a conversation with a woman that is nothing short of one of the most extraordinary conversations that Jesus ever had with anyone. You probably noticed that on Sunday mornings here lately that my sermons have been very similar in nature, and there is a reason for that. I've come to the honest-to-goodness conclusion that Sunday morning, that when I have the opportunity to speak to you, I want to share with you nothing more and nothing less than Jesus. And I want you to know who He is. I want you to know how He lived. I want you to know how He dealt with people. I want you to know how He dealt with problems. I want you to know who Jesus is. And so that's why so much here lately we've been talking about different conversations that Jesus had with people, or different stories pertaining to Jesus and someone else. In John chapter 4, like I said, a very extraordinary conversation takes place. I don't know if you know this, but water really changes everything. If you don't believe me, try not drinking water for the next week and see what happens. Okay? Water changes everything. Don't actually try that, by the way. I was kidding, joking. Kids, don't go home and not drink water. I was just kidding. Okay? Just going to throw that in there. But access to clean water actually in our world is becoming a very serious issue. I want to put a couple of slides up here for you. I don't know if you knew this or not, but 663 million people in the world today live life without clean water. 663 million people estimated live life without access to clean water. And then another slide up here, something else I find really interesting, is that one in five, around the world, 1 out of 5 deaths of children under 5 years of age is due to diseases from drinking unsafe water or bathing in unsafe water or something like that. 1 in 5 deaths of children under the age of 5 are pertaining to issues that they have from exposure in some form or fashion to water that's not clean. There's a global crisis really that's going on. This study says 783 million people do not have access to clean and safe drinking water, specifically drinking water globally, according to the United Nations Millennium Development Goals report. There is a very serious problem going on in the world today with people having access to clean water. Fortunately for you and I, we don't have that problem, do we? And so often we don't realize how fortunate we are that in our home that we have safe drinking water, that we can go to the store and we can buy bottles of water. That's why so often you may have noticed that a lot of missionaries, that they're seeking bottles of water, packages of bottled water to take with them or to send overseas. This is why. Because so many people do not have access to clean water. And so as you think about that, this next slide, I want you to understand that in a lot more ways than one, people in our world are thirsty. They're thirsty and they're looking for access to something that changes everything for them, and that is water. I don't know if you know this or not, but as far as Jesus is concerned, there are lots of people that are thirsty. Lots of people that are thirsty. And now, of course, I'm not talking about the water that you drink or you bathe in. I'm talking about the living water that Jesus is getting ready to talk about here in John chapter 4. I don't know why we feel this way. I sit sometimes in preachers' meetings, or I sit in lectureships, or I sit in things, and it's often talked about how people just don't want church like they used to, and about how people just don't really want anything to do with church, and they don't want anything to do with Jesus. And honestly, I think that's really irrelevant in a lot of ways, and I'll tell you why. Because people are thirsty. And sometimes people don't even know, they don't even realize that they're thirsty, that they're looking for something, they need something, there's an absence of something in their life. And so as we get ready to dive into this conversation that Jesus had with this woman, this Samaritan woman nonetheless, I want you to know that there are people living around you every single day that are thirsty. And you may be the only one that can give them something to drink. You may be the only person that steps up and says, I'm going to show this person who Jesus is. I'm going to show them what living a life as a disciple of Jesus is all about. You may be the difference in a person's salvation. You could be the difference in where a person spends eternity. And I know that seems like I'm putting a lot on you, by the way, and I am. I am, because really, in all reality, I'm not the one doing that. God is doing that. God puts that responsibility on each and every single one of us sitting here today. You could be the difference in a person and where they spend eternity. People are thirsty, and don't ever forget it. When you go to the grocery store, chances are you're going to come in contact with someone who is thirsty. When you go to that sporting event, you're going to sit around people who are thirsty. When you go to that school function, you're going to be around people who are thirsty. When you go to work every single day, you're going to be around people who are thirsty. Every single day of your life, with the exception of maybe those times when you stay home and don't do anything, you're around people all the time who are thirsty. And something I think that's even more tragic than a world of people who are thirsty and don't even know it is that we know what they need, and we do nothing about it. We know exactly what they need. We know that they need the living water that we're getting ready to mention in John chapter 4. We know. But we don't do anything about it. We let them live their life every single day without Jesus in it, and it doesn't even faze us. It doesn't even bother us. Don't you think that God probably has an issue with that? That mentality? And that type of heart? That you know people don't know Him? And you let it happen anyway, and it doesn't even bother your conscience? People are thirsty. John chapter 4, let's go ahead and dig in. We've got lots to talk about. Let's go ahead and just read the first about 9 verses. It says, Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself was not baptizing, but his disciples were, he left Judea and went away again into Galilee. And he had to pass through Samaria. So he came to a city of Samaria called Sychar, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, being wearied from his journey, was sitting thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. There came a woman of Samaria to drink water. Jesus said to her, Give me a drink. For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Therefore the Samaritan woman said to him, How is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink, since I am a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. So let's stop right there. And as we're going through this lesson, I want to share with you several different facts about water, about the living water that we're talking about. And the first one here is that this living water is open to all people. And let me show you what I mean by that. In verse 9, as Jesus speaks to this woman in verse 7, he's sitting down. His disciples have gone away into the city to buy food. Jesus is weary from his journey. He's tired. He's a man like you and I, okay, in a lot of ways. As far as the physical is concerned, we know he's perfect. But he got tired, and he sits down, and here comes this woman of Samaria to draw water. And in verse 7, Jesus says to her, Give me a drink. The woman is alarmed. The woman is shocked. She looks at Jesus in verse 9 and she says, Why are you talking to me? How do you're a Jewish man. Why are you talking to me? And you see there it says, for the Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. We know that to be true. I want you to know, first of all, that the living water that is Jesus is open to all people. And yes, I mean all people. I see that we have a few visitors with us this morning. I want you to know that we are so glad that you are here. We are so glad that you are here. I would love it if you would come back, join us again. We love visitors here at the Shakota Church of Christ, and we're always trying to look to add more people to our family so that we can help you get to heaven. That is our goal. We're so glad that you're here. And I want you to know that it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what kind of clothes you have to wear. It doesn't matter how nice of a car you drive. I want you to know it doesn't matter if you've made some bad decisions in the past. It doesn't matter whatever it is. I want you to know for your sake that we are so glad you're here regardless of any of that. We want you here. The living water that is Jesus is open for every single person. And I mean every person, no exception. No exception. Think about this. Jesus, and like I said, this conversation is huge. It's everything. And I'll tell you why it's everything. First of all, and before we even dig into what the text says, she was a woman, right? She was a woman, and Jesus was a man, right? She was a woman, Jesus was a man. Now, is that significant? You bet it's significant. We don't think about this because it's different in our culture. But at this time, in this culture, if you weren't related, men and women, they really didn't speak to each other. That just was a part of the culture. If you were unrelated men and women, you didn't really carry conversation with each other. That's just how culture was. Jesus went against the grain on that, right? He spoke to this woman being unrelated. And not only were they unrelated, and not only were they a man and a woman, and not only did that go against everything that society was teaching about relationship, Jesus, being a Jewish man, was speaking to a Samaritan woman. Now, why is that significant? Because what do we know about Samaritans? Well, we know the Samaritans were of mixed heritage, and they were looked down upon. They were seen as the people that you wanted nothing to do with. In fact, they have this neat little hand-washing ceremony, this little tradition that they came up with. You've read about that before, right? The little hand-washing ceremony. And the reason they did that was because they were scared that somebody might have come into contact with a Samaritan when they went into the temple, or when they went into the marketplace, I should say, rather. When they went into the marketplace, when they were buying things, they were scared that someone would have come into contact with the Samaritan, and so it was very symbolic of washing their hands of the Samaritans. They hated them. Hated them. And here's Jesus having a conversation with this woman, getting ready to say all that he's about to say. You think Jesus ever looked at a person and said, "Nope, you're not good enough"? No, I'm not talking to you. I'm way too good to be talking to you. Did that ever happen? He always went against the grain of society in a lot of different ways, and against what the Jews wanted. It didn't matter if they weren't related. It didn't matter if she was a Samaritan and he was a Jew. He was going to talk to her because she was significant to him. It didn't matter. She was significant. Jesus, the living water, is open for every single person. And I never want us to get to the point here at the Shakota Church of Christ where we ever say, well, it's open to most people, but if you have some kind of background where, you broke a few laws, or maybe you've been in jail before, we don't really want those kind of people, so let's just shove them out the door and tell them they're not welcome. Are you kidding me? Of course they're welcome. Everyone is welcome because that is who Jesus is. He invites everyone. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm pretty sure there was a story, and maybe it's in the Bible somewhere, where he spent time with some not real good people. Did that happen? I don't know. I forget my memory. Maybe it was tax collectors. Is that right? Maybe the Bible even says that they were sinners. Did that happen? Or is my memory just... It happened, didn't it? Those are the kinds of people that Jesus had no problem spending time with, because they meant something to him. They should mean something to us. Every single person is welcome. Every single person is invited. We want you to know who Jesus is. It's open for all people. Let's go on and read verse 10. And it's talking about how it permanently quenches thirst. Starting in verse 10, it says, Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him. Here we go. And he would have given you living water. She said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? You are not greater than our father Jacob, are you? Who gave us the well and drank of it himself and his sons and his cattle? Jesus answered and said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him shall never thirst. But the water that I will give him will become in him a well of water springing up to eternal life. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water so that I will not be thirsty, nor come all the way here to draw. Man, can you imagine? Here's a woman. She's come a long way to get this water to draw from the well. And Jesus says, I'll tell you what, give me a drink. She says, what are you doing talking to me? I mean, you're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan. Well, it didn't matter to Jesus. He's talking to her. And he says, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you what, not only do I want you to give me a drink, I'll tell you what, I want to give you something too. I want to give you this living water. Living water. That's interesting. What do we know about water? Like we've already discussed, well, water is essential to life, is it not? If you decided right now you're done drinking water forever, you wouldn't last very long. Water is essential to life. You have to have it in order to live. And is it happenstance? Does it just so happen that Jesus refers to himself as the living water? Is that coincidence? That's not coincidence, is it? Not at all. It's not coincidence. Jesus, in a very subtle way, is explaining to this woman that he is the water, that if she has of this water, that he is the one who is essential to life. Jesus is essential to life. He says, I want to give you this living water. And immediately, she's interested. She said, okay, Jesus, what do you mean this living water? What are you talking about? And he's like, I'll tell you what, this living water, you drink of it, guess what? You'll never be thirsty again. And what does she say? Give it to me. Come on. I want it. Give me the water that'll cause me to never be thirsty again. That sounds pretty good. You ever been out working in the field somewhere? Maybe you and a bunch of guys, maybe you're working cattle, maybe you're fixing fence, maybe you're doing something. And that horrible, horrible moment happens when you look back and you realize that you never brought the ice chest and you have nothing to drink and you are dying of thirst. You ever been there? Come on, I know you've been there. I know I've been there. It's one of the worst feelings ever. You're like, oh my goodness, who forgot the ice chest? We don't have any water. Can you imagine if every morning you could wake up, or if you could just drink at one time, whatever, and you could get a drink of water, and it's like, I'll tell you what, you're not going to be thirsty the rest of the day. Wouldn't that be something? If you take one bottle of water, you get a few sips of it, you're like, all right, I'm good. I'm ready to go work 12 hours. That's all I need. Our bodies are like, no, it's not. You need a lot more than that. But what if? What if some company came out with some water that one bottle of water would sustain you for an entire day's worth of work? What if they came out with this bottle of water that would sustain you for 1 week of work? Or a month? Or a year? Or a decade? That'd be crazy, right? We know that that's not going to happen. That's not how that works. And yet, here's Jesus saying, I have a water that I'll give to you. And notice he says, give it to you. He didn't say I'd make you pay for it. He said, I'll give it to you. And if you drink of this water, you'll never, ever thirst again. Isn't that significant? Like I said, one of the biggest tragedies in our world today is that there are people out there that they try to fill their life with something that satisfies them, and it doesn't work. They fill it with job. They fill it with kids. They fill it with relationships. They fill it with hobbies. They fill it with everything, and they don't understand why this hole won't go away. And they try, and they try, and they try, and it doesn't go away. They don't have satisfaction. They don't have joy. They don't have peace. They don't have all of it, and they don't know why. It's tragic. And then here we are. You and I on a Sunday morning in Chakotah, Oklahoma are sitting here reading about the living water. And week after week we come back and we're replenished. And we're ready to go another week. We're ready to go live for Him. We're ready for discipleship. And yet there are people out there who don't have that. Wouldn't it be something if we could have access to some type of water that permanently quenches your thirst? Now, I know this sounds good, and people look at this and they hear sermons like this and like, okay, that sounds good. Doesn't make a lot of sense, though. Okay, when you hear statements like, drink of my water and you'll never thirst again, we're like, okay, Chase, that sounds great, but what do you mean? Like, if I just drink of the living water, I'll never be unsatisfied again? What do you mean? I'm telling you this. Try it. If you don't believe me, just try it. This week, you're going to go out, and your Monday is coming. Okay, so is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. This next week is coming. For this next week, go out. Give Jesus your all. I'm talking everything that you have. Read. Study. Spend time communicating with Him. Listen to what He has to say. Pray without ceasing, like Paul said to do. Be here on Wednesday night. Be here tonight. Take in the Word every day. Be praying. Be thinking about Him. Make it your goal, your personal mission for the next week to do nothing but think about Him and Him only. And then come back next Sunday and let's talk. And watch what it does for your life. You will not ever experience a joy like that one. You will never experience a satisfaction like that one. It comes from living for Christ. If you don't believe me, and if you don't think that that's the truth, maybe it's because we really haven't ever truly sought first the kingdom. It permanently quenches thirst. And then starting in verse 16, it causes a strong desire to tell someone. Starting in verse 16, I love this. It says, he said to her, go, call your husband, and come here. Hold on, let's stop right there. Let's stop right there. In verse 15, after Jesus has told her about this living water, she says, I'll tell you what, give it to me. I want it. I don't want to have to come back here and draw water anymore. Give it to me. And in response to that, Jesus says in verse 16, go call your husband and come here. Is that coincidence? Is it random? No, there's a reason for that, but we'll talk about that here in just a second. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. Jesus said to her, you have correctly said, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands. And the one whom you now have is not your husband, and you have said truly. The woman said to him, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you people say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Jesus said to her in verse 21, Woman, believe me, an hour is coming when neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people the Father seeks to be His worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and in truth. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, He who is called Christ. And when that one comes, He will declare all things to us. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am He. At this point, His disciples came. And they were amazed that He had been speaking with a woman, yet no one said, what do you seek, or why do you speak with her? So the woman left her water pot and went into the city and said to the men, come see a man who told me all the things that I have done. This is not the Christ, is it? They went out of the city and were coming to Him. Now there's a lot there, and I know this chapter, there's so many verses we're skipping over, and we don't have time to talk about lots of the really deep theological things that we could talk about here in John 4, and I apologize, but for the sake of time, we just can't do it. But there are a few things that I want to bring out here in these several verses. For one, Jesus says, you've had 5 husbands, and the one you're now living with is not your husband. Now, that's pretty significant, isn't it? What did Jesus teach about divorce in Matthew chapter 19? Well, we know He taught about divorce, right? He hates it. And we know He talks about all these different things, whatever, but here He's talking to a woman who has had 5 husbands, living with a man she's now not married to. And I'll tell you, significant number one is this: the conversation didn't end. He didn't say, well, you're a sinner, sorry, not today, I've got other places to be and other people to talk to. Did you notice that? Even after he found out, not found out, of course he knew, he comes to the knowledge, or she comes to the knowledge that he already knows that she's living in sin, and yet he's still talking to her. Doesn't that reiterate the point that I already made earlier in the sermon? That every single person is welcome? It didn't matter. He was still going to talk to her. Regardless if she had 5 husbands or was living with someone who wasn't her husband. It didn't matter. He was still going to talk to her because every single person is welcome. And then I want you to notice in verse 26 that Jesus makes a really bold statement. He says, I who speak to you am He. Now you'll notice that Jesus didn't do this very often, really. It wasn't very often that Jesus would come right out and say, I am the Messiah. And He did to this woman. Something else that I find really significant that was brought to my attention here not too long ago in verse 28, and I've never thought about this before until it was brought to my attention. In verse 20 it says, so the woman left her water pot and went into the city. Now you tell me that's not significant. Here's this woman. She's come all this way to get water. Conversation with Jesus happens, and what does the text say that she did? She leaves her water pot. Why is that significant? Well, it's significant for a couple of reasons. For one, she had every intention on coming back. She was excited about this conversation. She was coming back. You better believe it. And when she left her water pot there, it wasn't going to be there forever. She was going to come back and get it because she was coming back to talk with Jesus some more because she had been impacted. She had been changed. And not only that, but in that moment, where was her mind? Where was her mind? Was it on her water anymore that she had come to draw? No, it wasn't about that anymore. That was insignificant now. What was significant? She had just had a conversation with God Himself in the flesh, and she knew it, and it changed her life. She left her water, and she went into the city. At that point, even the water that she had come, that is essential for her life, the water that she come all this way to get from the well, it didn't matter anymore. She left the water pot. And she was concerned with this conversation she had just had with what she had just found out to be the very Son of God. And you know, in verse 29 and verse 30, what is she doing? She's saying, come see a man who told me all the things that I have done. This is not the Christ, is it? They went out of the city in verse 30 and were coming to Him. Water is everything. Why is it everything? This is what water will do to you if you will let it. I promise. If this hasn't happened to you yet, if it hasn't caused a strong desire to go tell someone, maybe you haven't really understood what the living water is all about. Because you see, for the disciple of Jesus, it's natural. It's natural. It comes to it. You can't help but say, I want to go tell somebody. My life, that's not important anymore. I want to go tell somebody. You want to know one of my most favorite things about getting to preach the gospel for a living? I get to see people come to Christ. And not only do I get to see people, and not only do I get to see their lives changed, and not only do I get to see them fired up in such a way that I wish all of us were sometimes, all the time, not only do I get to see that in them, but I get to see them go and share it with somebody else. And in that moment, when you see somebody who's come to Christ, when you see that person so convicted and so fired up and so ready for discipleship that they go and they tell someone else, it does something to you. Let me tell you. It does something to you. Especially when you know that you got to play a role in their life. Can you imagine being Andrew? Now the Bible doesn't talk about Andrew. I'm talking about the one that Jesus called to be a disciple. We know Andrew obviously was an apostle. He was one that feared Jesus a lot. But the text doesn't really talk about him a lot as far as one who was always winning people and was standing up and was being courageous and that sort of thing. Talks about Peter a lot, right? It talks about Peter all the time. Who went and told Peter about Christ? Who got Peter there? It was Andrew. Maybe you're sitting there and you're thinking, I could never be a Peter. Okay, be an Andrew. Go reach that person that in turn is going to go reach a bunch of other people. Be that person. And I promise you this. When you see that person, I'm telling you, I want you to hear this. When you reach someone, and when you see them go and reach other people, it will bring about a joy that you have never experienced in your life. I promise. I promise. Go reach somebody, watch them reach someone else, and watch what it does to your faith. It changes everything. Trust me. No, don't trust me. Trust him. Trust this. Trust the Bible, because that's a pattern all through Scripture. Go reach somebody, then we'll go reach someone else. It causes a strong desire to tell someone. It does something else, too, that I find really neat. It gives newfound purpose, starting in verse 31. It says, meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, saying, Rabbi, eat. But he said to them, I have food to eat that you do not know about. So the disciples were saying to one another, no one brought him anything to eat, did he? And Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. Do you not say, there are yet 4 months, and then comes the harvest? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, that they are white for harvest. Already he who reaps is receiving wages and is gathering fruit for eternal life, so that he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. For in this case the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor. When you come into contact with the living water, it gives your life a new-found purpose. I want you to notice verse 34 specifically. Jesus makes a really interesting statement. He says, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. Jesus says, that's what sustains me, is doing the will of the Father. I should have put a picture up here on the screen, but I didn't. Gordon Ramsay. Man, one of the most famous chefs in all the world, and he got famous for a couple of things. For one, obviously, he's a pretty good cook, and two, he likes to scream and yell and cuss people out, and he got famous for it, okay? His entire life, his entire purpose in life is making food that people enjoy and pushing others to make that same type of food to the point that he's willing to scream, yell, cut, whatever he has to do, okay? That is his very purpose in life. I can learn a lot from him, actually, that he's so convicted about it. You can say that, right? Not the greatest dude, but at least he's convicted about something. His whole purpose is about making food for people to eat. Wouldn't it be something if our purpose was to go and give the people something that they could drink, something they could eat? Wouldn't that be awesome? And maybe, and I know I'm not talking about physically speaking, but hey, that's a huge part of it. That's a huge part of it. The living water gives newfound purpose. When Jesus says, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work, doesn't this sound like the woman when she left her water pot? At that point, it wasn't about the physically eating or the physically drinking. It's about doing the will of the Father. And I find that so interesting. Your purpose in life, I want you to really think about this really, really deeply. I want every single person in here to hear what I'm about to say next. What purpose in life are you shooting for? What is your purpose? When you get out of bed every single day, what are you wanting to accomplish? When you get out of bed every single day, what are you hoping to do that day? When you lay your head down on the pillow at night and you look back at your day, what are you hoping? What are you thinking about? What are you hoping that you did? What are you hoping you accomplished? What's your purpose? Who are you living for? What are you living for? The living water gives newfound purpose for every single person. And finally, this last one, I really like this one. It changes the lives even of those who hear about it. In verse 39, it says, from that city many of the Samaritans believed in him because of the word of the woman who testified, he told me all the things that I have done. So when the Samaritans came to Jesus, they were asking him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. Many more believed because of his word. And they were saying to the woman, it is no longer because of what you said that we believe, for we have heard for ourselves and know that this one is indeed the Savior of the world. It changes the lives of those who hear about it now. So let's picture this. So you come to the knowledge of the living water. You come to the well that is Jesus. You get to drink of it. Then you go. Someone else hears about it. And now guess what? Now they get to come to the well too. Now they get to participate. They get to be a part of it too. I think it's interesting that it says that many were believing at first because of the word that the woman had testified. In other words, because of her testimony. Some of you today here have some really awesome conversion stories. I've heard some of them. Some of you guys have some awesome conversion stories. I don't have the totally awesome conversion story. I was raised in the church, probably like many of us are. Many of us were. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's an awesome thing. That means that my parents were doing what they were supposed to be doing, or at least at that time, my mom was. I was raised in the church. I come to the knowledge eventually, like, hey, I'm hearing a lot about baptism. Maybe I should study about that. And I came to Christ that way. Somebody studied with me, and I figured out, you know what? In order to be a part of the kingdom, I need to be baptized. That's my story. And I'm sure that's the same for many of you. But I know a lot of you here, you have stories that are different than that. I know some of you have testimonies that are powerful. And let me just say to you, if you're wondering how you're going to reach people, use that. Use your story. Use your testimony. People relate to that, don't they? You know what I mean? People can relate to your story. I'll tell you what, since he's not here, I guess I'll go ahead and brag on him a little bit. Curtis's book that just came out, I'm telling you, if you haven't read it yet, you want to read it. I am absolutely convinced that there will be, I don't even know how many people that will come to Christ because of that book. Read it. It's awesome, I promise. When you think about stories like that, and so many of you, I'm telling you, go and share that with someone because it will impact people in a way that you don't even understand. When people hear stories, I mean, let's make this practical. When you go to people, it's not necessarily, a lot of people, they don't want to know what it can do. They don't want to know what it can do for them. First, they want to know what it's done for you, and then that impacts their decision to want it for themselves, right? Isn't that how it works? Let's be real honest. They want it in a very practical way. If they can see, if you go to a person and you say, this is what Jesus has done for me, and He can do the same for you too, watch. See what happens. Because that's what they want. What does it do? What happens? Well, this is what it did for me, and the same can happen for you. If you have one of those stories, take it, use it, share it with people. It's an awesome story. If you've had a point in your life where you had a sin, you had something so big, and you didn't think you would ever get away from it, and you overcame that through God, go share that with somebody. If you've lost someone that was close to you, and through your faith you overcame that, go share that with somebody. Take what's happened to you personally and go show someone what has happened. This woman, her testimony, how many people were reached? Well, we don't know exactly how many at the time, but there were a lot of people that came to Christ. Why? Because she went and said, this is what Jesus did for me. He told me everything that I've ever done. He is a prophet, and you want to listen to Him. And they came and they heard Him. People are thirsty. Don't forget it. People are thirsty. Every day, you're going to come into contact with someone who's thirsty. And the water that we have, it's open for everyone, all people. Everyone is welcome at the Shakota Church of Christ. Everyone is welcome into Christ. It permanently quenches your thirst. In other words, you drink of this living water, you'll never be thirsty. You'll never be dissatisfied again. It causes a strong desire. You just can't help it. It causes you to want to go tell someone about it. It gives newfound purpose, and it changes the lives of those who hear about it. And honestly, we look at it, and it's much too complicated for some of us when we think about what it is to go and share the water with someone. I'll tell you what, this is how easy it is. You take the water and you say, I'll tell you what, hey, I have this water, and I want you to have it. I can see that you're thirsty. And I can see that you need some water, so here's some water. Now, you don't have to drink it. You don't have to drink it, and maybe they'll sit there and they'll try to drink it in front of you. You don't have to drink it. That's not up to me. I can't make you drink it, but you seem really thirsty. And because I care about you, here's some water, and I want you to have it. It's that easy. It really is. I know you're thirsty. And I know what this water's done for me, and so here you go. I want to give you a drink. And if you drink it, that's awesome, and that's what I want. But if you don't drink it, It's entirely up to you. But here's the water because I think and I know that you're thirsty and I want you to have it. It's that easy. John chapter 4, man, water changes everything. It changes everything. As we get ready to offer up a song of invitation, man, we do this every single week, and it becomes one of those things that we don't really think about a whole lot. Especially those of us who have been hearing the song of invitation every week, 3 times a week for the last I don't even know how many decades. It becomes just another thing that we do. I want you to know that if there's anyone here, maybe now you're thirsty. Maybe you're looking for something. Maybe this has sparked something in your head. Come find me. Maybe you're embarrassed. Maybe you don't want to come down to the front. Maybe you don't want to talk about it like that. That's okay. Come find me after services. Come to lunch with me. You can come to lunch with my wife and I. We'd love for you to come to lunch with us. Come talk to us. You can come over to my house this afternoon. We can talk about it. Let's figure this thing out. Nobody else has to know. Let's talk about it, you and me. We can go have lunch. You can come into my home. Whatever you want to do. We can go play basketball. We can go whatever. We can go figure something out. You and I, we can get together. I'm available for you. I want you to know I'm here for you, and I want to help you. And there are others in this congregation that feel the same way. If you're in need of anything at all, if you want to obey the gospel and be baptized into Christ, we can help you with that. If you're needing prayers of the church or anything else, please come as we stand and sing.